It is said that the only constant in life is change. And a century ago, in a remote little mission station on the banks of the Umzimkhulu River, a remarkable religious order set in motion a profound process of change, the effects of which can still be seen in South Africa today. The history of the Trappist monks in South Africa and their resulting legacy of transformation was a unique event in the history of the Roman Catholic Church. Central to this story is Frans Fanner, who, as a result of his ambition to transform the lives of rural African people, caused conflict and dramatic change in the 1500-year-old tradition of monastic life. The remarkable story of the Trappist monks and the eventual transformation of their order through their missionary work in the foothills of the Drakensberg holds a special fascination for Steve Kotzer, who guides tours through the Trappist mission stations and gives an insight into the formation of this remarkable order.
The parts of medieval history we remember best from school are the romantic stories of knights, castles, and of course monasteries. Christian monasteries have existed for almost 1,500 years and are amongst the longest lasting elements of Western culture. Monasteries spread throughout Europe and became an incredibly successful way of life for generations of young men. In the centuries that followed the collapse of Rome and her empire, the prayer and hard work of monks gave a new sense of order to their world. Many monasteries became rich and powerful, but that wealth and political power also attracted followers more interested in those forms of earthly spoils. Sadly, within 500 years of St. Benedict, some monasteries had become corrupted. As a result of corruption, several attempts were made to reform the Benedictine rule. One such attempt took place in the Abbey of Notre de la Grande Trappe in Normandy in 1663.
At La Trappe, Abbé Jean-Armand de Rancé formulated severe and comprehensive regulations that sought to preserve the true spirit of monastic life as he saw it, which would be a life of strict penance governed by 1,802 regulations drawn up by de Rancé in 1663.
Their intention was to lead lives of prayer without ceasing, and the regulations helped them achieve this. Trappists gave up meat and only ate vegetarian food. They lived a life of silence and never engaged in idle conversation with each other. Their rules even extended to which hand they carried their tools in, which was the right.
Officially named the Cistercian Order of the Strict Observance, this most austere congregation of monks became known as Trappists after the name of their abbey.
Trappist life was based on the ideal of strict poverty and the denial of all earthly comforts. The aim of such austerity was to help the monks strive for God to the exclusion of all else.
This was essentially based on St. Paul's instructions in the first letter to the Thessalonians, where he wrote, "Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, in everything give thanks, for this is God's will for you in Jesus Christ." It might have been this that drew a young, sickly Austrian named Wendelin Fanner to the Trappist order. Although he was fully aware that Trappist life entailed its own share of hardship, his poor health gave Fanner reason to believe that he was at death's door anyway, and that a routine of strict penance would be a suitable way to end his life, which he expected to be quite short. In a farewell letter to his family, Wendelin wrote,
Liebe Mutter und Geschwister,
Dearest mother, brothers and sisters, you will be surprised to hear what I am doing today. I am going far away to the Rhine province of Germany to join a Trappist monastery. I am doing it because I believe it to be God's will. I don't want to get rich. I seek no eminence. I don't want to make my name in the world. I want to live there in solitude, poor and unknown, as long as they have use for me.
und hoffentlich für immer, wenn man mich dort brauchen kann.
Little did Fanner know that he would not remain unknown for long. Once he was accepted into Mariavold Monastery, he took the new name of Francis, and a remarkable transformation ensued. The demanding way of Trappist life, combined with their wholesome vegetarian diet, ironically produced an unforeseen and remarkable recovery in his health.
Because of his energy, his character, he was sent to Eastern Europe, to Bosnia, and established a monastery there of the Trappists. He was able to motivate many followers. Soon that monastery counted 100 monks.
After 10 years of laboring at Maria's stern, Franz Fanner was invited to attend the general chapter of his order in 1879. Here, the solemn collection of stern-faced, bearded Trappist abbots gathered to discuss all matters of importance for that year.
And at this meeting, a bishop from Port Elizabeth turned up, asking the monks to send people to South Africa to teach Africans proper agriculture, especially in the Eastern Cape. Nobody answered or accepted this request. They kept all holy silence, these holy abbots. However, the youngest one, with flaming eyes and a red beard, a character on fire, said, "If no one goes, I will go." That was Fanner.
And with that simple statement, one of the most extraordinary adventures in the history of the Roman Catholic Church began. And so it was that in 1880, Franz Fanner and a select group of monks left Maria Stern bound for Africa. This must have been a huge leap of faith for the monks, because as Fanner put it,
Wie konnte ich diese Leute dazu bringen? Wo liegt der Zauberstab?
What do I offer the monks in return? Well, an excellent diet, only no meat, no fish, no eggs, no butter, no coffee, no condiments, no sweets, nothing to drink except water and plenty of that. I offer them a hard palliasse to sleep on and coarse woven clothes to wear. I demand hard manual work like digging, threshing, mowing, washing, chopping wood, scrubbing floors, and all of this in the heat of Africa. And for this I offer and give no pay, no remuneration.
Keinen Lohn, kein Entgelt.
Bishop Rickards had wanted the monks to start a mission station near Port Elizabeth, but the farm that had been selected for them was far from the lush conditions that they were used to in Europe.
The adventure did not succeed as it was expected because of the drought, difficult agricultural conditions.
And to make matters worse, the bishop informed Fanner that he had run out of money and could no longer keep his promise to support them. Fanner assembled his community and told them,
Und damit ich mein gegebenes Wort nicht mehr zurück.
So that I do not take back my given word, I shall do like the Spanish conquerors when they reached Mexico. When they entered the country, they burned their ships and were thus forced to stay and go forward. On my part, I burn my bridge and declare here and now, I shall not leave Africa anymore.
Ich werde nicht mehr zurückweichen.
Prior to the Trappists' arrival, Christian missionaries flocked to Natal during the 1850s.
Various mission societies wanted to set up mission stations in this part of Southern Africa, partly because they had been enchanted by the stories of the Zulu kingdom, and they thought that if they could convert the leaders of the Zulu kingdom and their people, then Zulu people will be able to spread the Christian gospel throughout Africa.
Amongst those who came were French Catholic clerics from the port of Marseille, the missionary oblates of Mary Immaculate.
The oblates had made small efforts to break out from serving the English-speaking community, primarily was what they came for. But they had made some efforts to go into the Zulu, but it never was very successful. The Trappists came along, and whatever they did, something gelled with them and the people, and they seemed to make much more progress than the oblates had been able to do before them.
The Trappists and Abbot Francis came at a time when a lot of things had started building up in Europe, you know, so-called industrialization and so forth. So they came here with a lot of new ideas, and those ideas they used as tools, you know, to establish, first of all, themselves, and also to try to work on the socio-economic context of the people.
Frans Vanner arrived in Durban like an energetic whirlwind in December 1882. He made an inspection of a substantial farm on the banks of the Hlathozana River and purchased it shortly afterwards.
Am Fest des Heiligen Stephanus.
We left the bluff on St. Stephen's Day and went as far as Pinetown by train, and there we reloaded everything onto heavy ox wagons. Our mobile monastery caused quite a stir.
Sensation für die Eingeborenen.
Pater noster, qui ensis celis.
On the 27th of December, after sleeping under the wagons, the Trappists participated in the Holy Sacrament. And from this humble beginning would grow the greatest Trappist monastery in the world, Marion Hill.
Marion Hill is zijn Name.
Marion Hill is its name, for we shall dedicate it to Mary, the Mother of God, and to St. Anne. We add the word hill, for the main building will come to stand on a low hill.
Hill füge hinzu.
Development of Marion Hill was a priority, partly for the monks to become self-sustainable, and partly because agricultural development was based on the century-old Benedictine method of attracting converts by example.
It is the old Benedictine missionary approach, which was used in Europe to implant Christianity among the various tribes there. And so they had that when they arrived here, and this is what they used, actually. It is a method based mainly on the example of a way of life focused really on the ora et labora, pray and work.
With this as their tenet, the monks set to work, all the time retaining the hours and rules of the Trappist order in Europe. The monastery soon burst into life with visible energy, and it wasn't long before the monks began to make an impact on the local community, although it was not immediately positive.
In an African sense, in those days, if we're just a group of men, people would normally associate your visit with a kind of conflict of some sort, because they associate you with an army.
The local people, at first, they feared them. They did not come close to them. They would only come to watch what they are doing, but without wanting any association as such.
The Soeurs people of Chief Manzini were fascinated by the new arrivals across the river. Everything about them was different to the other colonists. Trappists wore long black and white robes and shaved their heads. They never spoke and never slaughtered any cattle. But strangest of all, performed hard manual labor in the fields, something that white men were never seen doing at that time.
Every day these people, these Black Adam's children, come down from the hills and mountains and sit by our huts and packing cases to look and wonder at the marvelous things being taken out of the cases and the wonderful things being done with them.
The Zulus were fascinated by these white men who were working in the fields, very unusual, who were keeping silence, who were not eating inyama, no meat, no beer, no women, still stranger.
It was precisely this example of ora et labora that the monks wanted to inculcate into the community.
Pfanne believed in the education of the head, the intellect of the hand. He wanted to teach them skills which they could learn from the brothers.
Farming methods that the Trappists brought from Europe were amongst the things that they shared with the local Shozi people.
This was one of the major skills that they imparted upon the people. Very significant skill, how to plant their fields.
The monks not only taught the inhabitants how to farm more effectively, but they also encouraged them to settle on the mission station. One of the criteria, though, was that they had to abide by the rules of the monastery, which some found difficult.
They found that the norms and that were expected of them to live by when they put their homes on the mission land were difficult for them to uphold, especially on issues of morals. Those who, for example, had 2 wives, they were allowed still to live in the mission land, but that there would be no further wife being taken.
Another concern was that ilobola, the customary exchange of bride wealth, was not permitted in Christian marriages, and this tradition formed a very important part of the African social strata.
If Christian families were to do away with lobola, their daughters will be in a very tenuous situation in marriages where they marry outside Christian family backgrounds, in that their daughters will not be given the same status as women who had been through this practice.
The monks took a pragmatic approach when dealing with these customs.
Most missionaries were quite willing to tolerate, to some extent, that some of the situations, and say that for the first generation of Christians, we should not enforce all the rules that we expect of Christians. But certainly for the next generation, we think that polygamy and ukulobola might somehow be avoided.
Pfanne realized that it would be difficult to change the views of the older generation of Zulus. He knew that the monastery school would be an essential element in the Christianization of the people, but there was initially still some resistance from the locals.
The Zulu men at the time, even the chief of the area, was somehow suspicious of their agenda, you know, spoiling their young boys or spoiling their culture.
However, as the Zulu men began to appreciate the skills that they were learning while working alongside the brothers, their attitude towards schooling for their children mellowed.
The chief eventually allowed at least 2 boys from each kraal to enroll to the school. That means they began to see the good in what the Trappists were trying to do.
In gloria Dei Patris. Amen.
The issue of education for the blacks in Natal became a bone of contention as the chiefs realized that they would only be able to communicate successfully with the colonial administration in English.
For some of the African leaders, literacy was key in their communication with the colonial authorities.
However, access to schooling was woefully inadequate, and so the chiefs turned to the Trappists.
When the chiefs asked them, "Are you prepared to teach our young people to read the flies on the paper?" He said, "Okay, let them come."
Contrary to the segregation in the government schools, Marion Hill would accept pupils from all race groups. Pfanne explained it thus.
Ich kann Rassendiskriminierung nicht ausstehen.
I cannot stand discrimination between the races. What matters is what we are before God, not the color of our skin. When dogs and cats at times have to get used to each other, why not black and white children? We have tried it and it works. Besides, all boys entering the monastery institute are cooked and boiled in a warm bath and dressed in clean clothes. Vermin infests a white skin just as readily as a black one.
However, the abbot's plan for mixed-race schooling evoked a storm of protest, and he himself wrote,
Some representatives of the white race were kind enough to make a special trip to Marion Hill and enlighten me on the monstrosity of my plan.
The abbot was finally forced to yield to public pressure and confine his school to black Africans only. Fanna's disregard for race was also applied to the church services, and after a temporary church was erected, anyone was allowed to attend the divine services of the Trappists. No single event was more significant, though, than the first burial conducted by the monks in the Marion Hill Cemetery. The first Catholic convert to the monastery was, in fact, a dead person.
Many African people began attending services at the monastery, but there were no immediate converts. The first baptism occurred under unusual circumstances. An elderly Shorzy man had shown some interest in the activities of the monks, and when he fell ill, asked for a priest to attend him. Father Joseph Begner rushed off to help this person, but when he arrived, the poor man had already lost consciousness. Uncertain of how to proceed, the Trappist father decided to baptize the patient anyway, and the man promptly died. It was decided to give the man a Christian burial as well, and he became the first occupant of the new cemetery. His funeral made a lasting impression on the Shorzy people because they realized that Catholic ceremonies bore a striking resemblance to their own.
From that day forward, increasing numbers of converts flowed to Marion Hill, seeking not only education from the church, but baptism into the faith, and so another transformation of the community began.
Soon the monastery began to flourish, with buildings bursting from the ground. In 1885, Frans Fanna was elected as the first abbot of Marion Hill. He quickly realized he would have to make changes to the customs of his order if the monks were to be effective missionaries. The most significant innovation was the arrival of 5 women who became nuns to assist in mission work.
The Trappists were not allowed to speak in public. They were using their sign language, and therefore they couldn't reach out to the people around. So he needed almost like mouthpieces. So he got this idea of calling women from Europe to come and help him.
Fanna had put an appeal in the Marion Hill magazine, Forget Me Not, which was published in Austria and Germany. And on August the 5th, 1885, 5 young women found themselves on the Marion Hill doorstep.
They formed a nucleus of the missionary sisters of the Precious Blood. Because they were not Trappistans, they were not even contemplative sisters. What they did, they could go out, interact with the people to improve the situation of the indigenous people.
To this day, the missionary congregation of the Precious Blood remains a thriving congregation of missionary nuns. However, any kind of contact with women was expressly forbidden by the regulations of the Trappist order, and so the consequences of this event were enormous and clearly demonstrated the lengths that Fanna was prepared to go to in order to achieve his goals. Though much had indeed been accomplished, in reality, Marion Hill was now poised on the brink of its greatest act of transformation.